Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on another edition of the Buckeye Extra Football Podcast. I'm Joey Kaufman, joined by columnist Rob Oller, talking about Ohio State's 24-6 win at Washington. We thought this was going to be a sort of a game where Ohio State maybe could be on an upset alert, and there was some funky stuff happening early in the game where you had a fumbled punt return. You had Washington attempting a fake field goal to move the sticks, a whole bunch of stuff. And then late in the second quarter, Buckeyes turn it on and they score on a touchdown to go up 7-3 at halftime. And really, I don't think it was really much closer than that point in the second half. Buckeyes sort of rolled away, but a fun game. Husky Stadium, a lot of scarlet, sailgating, just a kind of a cool atmosphere for the Buckeyes' first trip to the Pacific Northwest, Seattle version since 2007.
Yeah, it's beautiful looking out over Union Bay, excuse me, Washington Lake, Union Bay on Washington Lake, one of the more scenic venues that we'll travel to, or probably anywhere in college football. And loud too, the way they've built the stadium with the overhang on both sides, kind of the roof coming out, makes it very loud, at least where the fans are sitting. I don't know on the field if that carries over because just the way that the place is designed. I think it is probably pretty loud. But first road test, Julian saying we can get into that. Joey and I had a little uh, back and forth during the game about whether Julian saying was playing exceptionally well or just sort of meh. So we can talk about that. Um, but a big win, and Joe and I were just talking before we came on here that it may be a case where Ohio State has to beat itself the rest of the way. We'll get to that. But looking at the Washington game, what impressed you the most about OSU?
Maybe we'll start with saying you want to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that
I
big
I thought,
because this was, I think, a revealing game for him. First road test for a redshirt freshman quarterback, and how would they handle things? We saw them in their previous big game against Texas, where they sort of kept the training wheels on with him and didn't really ask him to do too much. It felt similar with this game at Washington, where they did not put a ton on his play. They did not ask him to take a ton of deep shots. They came out running the ball pretty heavily. 11 of the first 13 plays were runs. One of those was saying scrambling for a first down. So I guess 10 of the first 13 were intended to be passing plays. But they really, I think, tried to manage the game and not have him do too much. And much like Texas, I thought he showed he probably could have done a little more than even the coaching staff had asked him to do.
absolutely. I thought he looked, I mean, shaky is too strong. He didn't look quite as comfortable early, I didn't think. And then I'm writing for a lot of it, so I'm not focusing on saying as much as Joey was when you're going to write the kid or whatever, or Hedge. Brian Hedger was there out there with us, our hockey guy. Got a little dose of Ohio State football. Good for him. Um, but there's no question that Sayan can make the throws. He made some incredible throws. He kind of had some clunkers too. Maybe that's what I was seeing a little bit. He just wasn't as on the mark. Um, but he also had some beautiful throws. The first touchdown, he read the blitz coming in. I think they were set up on that play. They kind of expected that. Full blitz comes at saying he reads it, he's poised, he throws it underneath the little route to Jeremiah Smith, who takes it to the house. I think that kind of opened things up, got kind of loosened them up, and from there it was, as Joey said, off to the races. So I would give saying like a B plus, which is pretty good. First road game. I probably originally had him B or B minus, but after watching some stuff again, I thought, okay, that's a B plus game. And maybe you can speak to this. You wrote about the defensive line, but afterward we were talking to Ryan Day, and it was, the thing about Ohio State's defense is the offense doesn't have to be incredible every week. And that's kind of what we were looking at. Again, Joey said it was kind of like the Texas game. Don't beat yourself and let your defense bail you out. And that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, I think it's notable to me how differently they are managing this situation with Julian Sand than they did 4 years ago with CJ Stroud, who was also a second year guy, had redshirted as freshman, where he hadn't played all that much. And they came out of the gate that year and they put a lot on CJ Stroud's plate to win them football games. You go back to September of 21, he threw the ball 54 times against Oregon, had a game against Minnesota where in that season opener where he threw the ball 22 times. He was throwing a lot early in that season, saying through 28 times, but a lot of those were not necessarily. He was having to take deep shots, and things were set up, I think, in some easy situations for him in terms of what he had to do. And I think part of that is Ryan Day trusts his defense so much more than 4 years ago. And you don't have to have an offense where if you don't break 30 points, you're gonna lose the game. They scored 24 and they were able to get a road win, and that's because their defense clamps down so well, and especially in the red zone. They have not a lot of red zone touchdown all season. So they're even when teams do move the ball against this group, they're going to get stops. And so you can tell the degree to which Day and his staff trust the defense to win them games, which is so different than 4 years ago. And the way they're managing a young quarterback, where you don't have to have him be a Heisman Trophy finalist from out of the chute to win you games in the Big Ten. And I think that's a luxury that they have with saying that they did not have earlier in Day's tenure, I think.
Yeah, exactly. If you're a Ohio State fan, two things have to really brighten your day. Um, overall, one is the play of Julian Sand, which was a question mark coming in. You heard he was really good, this phenom, whatever. Well, he's for the most part lived up to it. Just as importantly is the defensive line, which they lost all four starters, really good starters. These weren't just kind of stumble bums,
Right.
and NFL guys. And Joey wrote this after the game. Just this was supposedly a potential weak link entering the season, and it is a strength. And when you've got that going, this no-name defense, now I guess they want to be called because I don't know, Caden Curry, who had a monster game, said, "Oh yeah, we're just a no-name afterwards. We're a no-name defense. Nobody knows who we are." Okay, well they probably will start to know, but um, that was impressive. And when the cliche game one in the trenches, at least on the defensive trench line, the Buckeyes are solid.
I mean, they really did come into this season a group of relative anonymous backups, because Caden Curry was Sawyer Tuamolo's backup for the last 3 years. Kenyatta Jackson was a backup for 3 years. I mean, those guys rotated in, but they were not frontline players. And you have Caden McDonald in the interior. He was a backup for 2 seasons. Tywon Malone, he's in his third season after transferring from Mississippi State, or sorry, Mississippi. He's been a backup for a couple of years. And then Edric Houston was a sophomore who was a backup last year. So these are guys who have waited in the wings for a chance to start. Bo Atkinson, a transfer from North Carolina, is the only transfer who's been in the mix as far as their rotation goes. Logan George, who came from Idaho State, hasn't been part of that rotation. I don't think he's actually played a snap just yet this season. So you have all these guys. It was sort of an unusual situation in college football where you have just a group just hanging out, waiting for a chance to play, and now they've moved up the depth chart, and it feels like they are making up for lost time, because you think about somebody like Caden Curry and the season he's had. He's a senior. This is his one chance to flash, and he doesn't have a ton of time left, but he is making an impression very very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Washington had a quarterback that is the type of dual threat quarterback that has given Ohio State fits in the past. Um, and yet they stopped it. They held it. They're the defensive. I mean, credit to Matt Patricia here. I wasn't sure how Matt Patricia, the defensive coordinator, would fit. NFL guy coming in, seems like he's a one-stop, move on type of guy like Chip Kelly. Maybe not. It just kind of feels that way. How much is he going to really put into it? But I guess that answers my question. If you are a one-stop guy and this is a dress rehearsal to get back in the NFL, you want to do as well as you can. You want to just lay it all on the line and impress, get that resume, polished up. And there has been no drop off. In fact, this defense statistically is better than last year's through 4 games.
They have not gone through the period last year where it always seemed as if they'd give that opening drive touchdown where you're sort of a heavyweight prize fight and you kind of let the opponent sort of wear himself out. And then you come back. They've been good out of the gate. I think what's impressive is there have been times this season where Matt Patricia's felt like he's been able to design a bunch of elaborate fronts and the way he's able to shift defensive linemen and linebackers as part of blitz packages. I mean, that was certainly, I think, part of the story of week one's big win over Texas was they were able to really be creative and get pressure on Arch Manning. And they didn't always do that against Washington. They were very, I think, disciplined in their rush. The term they often used during the week and even after the game was cage the pocket, where just sort of keep Damon Williams Jr. contained and in that pocket, and eventually it'll collapse and smother him. And that worked well. 6 sacks for Ohio State in total, which is nearly as much as the 7 they had in the first 3 games. So really just I think they did a good job of holding on in coverage, keeping Williams in the pocket, not letting him break loose, and eventually things just broke down. He did get sacked. So I think that was I think impressive as well. This was I think in a lot of ways on the players as well for just not getting out of position because Ryan Day mentioned that after the game. If you get defensive linemen who are chasing sacks and really trying to do too much to bring somebody down like Williams, he can squirt out of there and get loose. And it felt like he could be probably his most dangerous, not only when he was just scrambling, but if he was buying time and on the move. And you saw that on a couple times in the first half where he sort of breaks out of the pocket and then the receiver maybe follows him along. That's when he's dangerous, and they really contained him.
Yeah, again, credit to the philosophy of sort of caging and unselfishness. I mean, these guys are 18, 19, 20 years. They want to be stars. They want to make the sack. So to collectively get them to work in unison and not be an individual star, um, it seems to be working. And it's hard when you've got young guys who want to be stars. Some of these guys are still remember their star high school days, and they want to repeat that where they were like, they were the headline every week in their local paper and that type of thing. And now I think this no name thing is a way to is a catalyst almost so that they don't think of themselves individually. It's almost like this conscious thing of, we want to be ghosts in terms of our name recognition, and we're all for one, one for all type of deal. And so far, so good. And you've got to give Patricia again credit for that, I guess.
Well, you think about their unselfishness too. I mean, this is a group where if you've waited time as a reserve to get your starting chance, somebody like Caden Curry's got 1 year to impress NFL scouts as a full-time starter in college. I mean, you could. It's not hard to draw up a scenario in which you have a bunch of defensive linemen maybe who are pressing and trying to do too much, and they don't have the cohesion together, and they did a good job in their pass rush. I mean, this is a defense through 4 games has allowed 2 touchdowns, which by my math is good.
Right. The other thing is, I wasn't sure about the run defense. Where did it stand coming into this game? It was kind of hard to tell. You're playing Grambling State, Ohio University, Texas was, a legit team, and the Huskies had some talent in the backfield, and Ohio State limited Washington to 61 rushing yards. That's pretty good. And it wasn't like Washington had to throw the ball a ton to get back in the game. Yeah, second half a little bit, but it's 7-3 at halftime, so it's not like they were playing from behind. And yet Ohio State's defense just cracked down on it. And we didn't even talk about the secondary yet, which of course is solid. I don't think King Benosen had a penalty, did he?
He has not had a penalty this season. Hey, and I will add this on the running game. The total was 61 yards on 30 carries. And even Jonah Coleman, who was really talented
Yeah.
running back as part of that offensive trio with Williams and Denzel Boston, their wide receiver. He had 70 yards on 13 carries, but 34 of those yards came on one run. So he had 36 yards on 12 carries, an average of 3 yards per carry. That's a really nice job to bottle him up as well. We talked about the way they contained Williams in the pocket, but they contained the other half of that backfield duo as well.
Hey, you said Ingrid if I can never get that name right, has not had a penalty this
I
year.
don't believe
I think he had a holding penalty, I
that.
thought.
Well, you may be correct.
I think he's had one, but that's pretty good considering he seemed like he had one per game last year. The handsy man. So, they are very stout on the back end.
He does have
Very, very
he
strong.
does have one. You're correct,
Yeah.
but he does have one per PFF.
But still, that's pretty good. I mean, that's to be expected almost
Yeah,
for anybody. What about offensively? What did they do well? I mean, I guess saying, you know, threw some strikes.
they,
Um,
they got the ball to Jeremiah Smith eventually in the second.
well, yeah, I guess that's all you have to do. They didn't really throw the tight ends that much, which surprised me. I think what, one or two catches?
They,
Maybe just
they they really came out with a commitment to run the ball as
right.
well, and it was a lot of C.J. Donaldson early on, and there was probably some frustration where they didn't punch it on that first drive where it was 4th and 1, and they moved the ball well on the ground, and they did have a mismatch, I think, up front. I mean, we talked about Washington's talented playmakers, but we did not talk about their defensive line or offensive line in the lead up to this game. And I think Ohio State felt as if it had an advantage in the trenches. And that not only included its defensive line getting pressure, but it also included its offensive line against Washington's defensive line, which is probably why they came out running the ball as much as they did. They didn't have anything to show for it on that first drive. And then eventually Bo Jackson got the bulk of the work. He was their leading rusher, ran 17 times. C.J. Donaldson was next up with 9 carries, and then James Peoples had 3. So this running back rotation looked like a really a two-man one and one rotation where it seemed like Bo Jackson is the clear feature back, the freshman, and we saw him go over 100 yards in the last 2 games against Grambling State and then Ohio, and you wondered, well, did he just do that in the second half against some backups and Ohio State continues to bring him along slowly? But I think the fact that he was there by a significant margin, their featured back and their Big Ten opener on the road against Washington showed that they do have a high level of trust in Bo Jackson, and it certainly seems at this point he is their running back number one. Even if he did not get the start, that was C.J. Donaldson. He was the guy they turned to the most 80 yards on 17 carries.
Did James Peoples even get in the game? He probably did, but I didn't.
He had 3 carries, and they used him more on some passing situations. They may view him as the best pass blocker. He caught 3 balls for
Yeah. Well,
6.
that's right. Yeah, because they threw underneath to early to go to your point of the conservative offense. They were kind of throwing underneath through the backs. Now, I walked into the game to the stadium with a Washington fan who was on the bus I rode in from Bellevue, and he was very concerned. And I didn't realize this, and it's not that it's shocking. I think Ohio State's had this before, but all the offensive linemen weigh at least 300 pounds. The guy said this is by far the biggest offensive line we will face this season. Um, and you got some really big boys in there. Onyanwa,
Yeah.
he's not playing much. He's 335. Chabola 327. The lightweight is Carson Hinsman at 300. So, it's hard to move those boys out of the way when they start road grading. Um, you've got a big athletic offensive line. We've talked about the defensive line. I'm not sure what's the weakness with this team, because they've checked the two boxes I had coming into the season. Again, D line, quarterback. We talked about the running backs too, and now with Bo Jackson, there's another box that's been checked because we weren't really sure they were going to be capable in the backfield, but Peoples didn't know a whole lot about. And CJ came over from West Virginia. It was like he was good. Maybe he wasn't great. I don't see a lot of weakness at this point.
No, I think they have addressed the question of the running game. I think a little bit where you have somebody like Bo Jackson who does have some explosiveness. I think for somebody like Bo Jackson, the question for him is going to be how does he hold up over a longer season? He did not play last year and he missed most of his senior season in high school because of a knee injury. So I think it's good Ohio State is working him in and giving him reps and snaps. But if they're going to play a 16, 17 game schedule, I think that's something they're certainly going to be conscious of is somebody like him where your snap count is going from almost none as a senior in high school to quite a bit more. So I think that's something they're going to have to manage, and then they are probably going to need to play all three in some fashion or another. So I think that's something that they need to work on. And CJ Donaldson, I think people view him as just a bigger back. I think he does have a role, and his skill set is, I think, not just confined to he's a bigger back. He came to college in West Virginia. He was recruited as a tight end, and he does have some good set of hands. Caught that 4th-and-1 touchdown. So I think they're going to probably look to use him in some of those spots, and they've motioned him out as a receiver a couple times out of the backfield this season. So I think it's something to look for as well in their run game.
Yeah, Joey, I think had this as not a trap game, but a potential loss preseason. If you looked at the schedule, I think he kind of changed his mind after seeing the first three games. Um, and I just wasn't sure what Washington was this year. I think they're going to be okay. They're not too bad. They've got a quarterback. That'll take you places. But it was a dominating performance defensively for Ohio State. And looking at the schedule, I wrote a column. This, there's a chance for this defense to be the best of the modern era. I didn't really get into too much. The 1990s, they had really good defenses. Um, the standard is the high bar is 1973. They allowed like 5 point, I think 8 points a game and 4 point something during the regular season. Different era, can't, apples and oranges comparison. They didn't throw the ball much in college football back then, at least in the Big Ten. But this defense, 5.5 points a game allowed, which leads the nation. And Joey said it, have not allowed a red zone touchdown, have not allowed a rushing touchdown. Um, so this could be a very elite. There already is elite defense, but if you look at the schedule, and we'll get to Minnesota here, you got Minnesota, Penn State's there, Illinois. None of these teams really scare you that much. Who did I leave out? You have Illinois. They don't play Indiana. They don't play Oregon,
Right.
which like really helps the defensive stats, I think, because those are two pretty good offenses. Now, we'll see Big Ten championship game of which college is changing so much. I don't even remember if there is a Big Ten championship game. Yes, there is. I'm kidding, but you would think that's probably Oregon at this point. We'll see. But so they'll have to face that offense, but none of these offenses are that scary. I mean, you just played the team that led the nation, Washington, 55. points a game, and you held them to 6. So, there's going to be a letdown more than likely at some point. You go in against a team that you know you're going to beat, maybe they score 14 on you or 20, maybe, but maybe not.
Here's one other stat I'll leave you with from the Washington game. Washington came in 27 of 36 on third downs, 75% through its first three games. It was just one of 11 against Ohio State.
Mm,
Ohio State's been good in the red zone. They've also been good on third down. Ryan Day often talked about having a sort of a culture on defense, and I think one carryover from Knowles is there are times when the defense is backed up in its own territory. It's backed up on its own heels, and it's able to get those stops in some tough spots. And sometimes Hayden Curry talked about this after the game. Sometimes as a defense, you think, shoot, we're going to give up this drive. The offense has got us, and they don't have that mentality. So I think there's some. We talked about the way they're rushing and the scheme and the way they've designed things up front, but some of it is just I think intangibles and attitude and confidence, and that has carried over. And I think that's apparent where Ohio State's in some tough situations and they get the stop.
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Jim Knowles does deserve credit, now at Penn State. Sorry, Jim. Um, for sort of instilling that never give up attitude. I remember there was a game. Was that the Texas game last year where he
Texas was that was a stop in the red zone that led to the scoop and score by Sawyer. There was the game against at Penn State where they had the goal line stand. His whole thing, his whole mantra for his defense. They always said, "If you give us a yard, we'll defend it." That was the
yeah,
whole
yeah.
sort of
He actually got upset. I remember, I think it was the Texas game where there was sort of an assumption that Texas would score and Ohio State, I think it was Texas and Ohio State, Ryan Day was already thinking about offensively what they needed to do. And Noel said, wait a minute, they haven't scored yet. So that attitude it was instilled and carries over.
yeah. One of the always the great ironies is he never liked the bend don't break moniker, but hey, it's there was a lot of bending at times last season, but they rarely broke. So
Right.
I think, but I think sometimes that gets used as maybe a label to pick at a defense. I think in this case it's for Ohio State when it's a reflection of the way they can get stops when they need to. What's before we transition to the Minnesota game, I will maybe let's touch on this real quick. We've now covered games in consecutive seasons at Oregon and Washington. These are new schools in the Big Ten. Two, I think, cool environments for Ohio State fans who didn't make the trip, or I mean, one of them. Do you have a preference on where you would go if you could between these two? How would you compare the two Pacific Northwest games?
Well, in pure beauty, if the aesthetic, it's hard to beat Washington with that lake right there, and there are mountains way in the distance. But in terms of just atmosphere, I'd take Autzen. Um, Partly because it was what was last year's matchup, like 2 versus 3, one
Yeah,
versus
it was a top five game.
it was a top 5 game. The same guy that I walked to the Husky Stadium with said he will never go to a game at Autzen again because they are the most abusive, worst fans that he's ever seen. And my experience was he's not kidding. I mean, the Oregon fans are leading vulgar, obscenity-laced chants, but it's loud and it's energy. They bring energy, and I would say if you had to pick one of the two, I would go with Oregon. Um, but Washington, very loud, um, very intense, and beautiful.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think if you were simply searching for how can I teleport and be in the stands at the most rabid college football environment possible, between the two, you'd pick Austin Stadium. I think it was a louder crowd, and I think you could the energy was higher. You could there was a heavier split of Oregon fans. I think more Washington season ticket holders were willing to sell their tickets to Ohio State fans. So from that sense, I think Oregon is the probably the cooler road trip to make, but it's a harder place to get to. You got to get a car and figure out a way to drive from Portland to Eugene, or figure out a way to fly in to Eugene, Washington. I think is a little more ease of travel if that is a consideration. You can we both took light rail to or you took a bus, I took light rail. So it's easy to get to as far as flying to Seattle. You can probably get nonstop, and then you just take public transport into the stadium. But and
Well,
still a great environment as well, right along the bay there, and scenic. But the edge goes to Austin for being a little louder.
yeah, you mentioned that, and now that I'm putting it together, the two best venues in terms of game day atmosphere, I would say would be Penn State, very hard to get to.
Mm.
Just like there's nothing else to do
Right.
there. And Eugene, not much else to do there. These two places that it's like that's it. I mean, Washington has pro sports. Yeah, they have a great fan base, but it gets spread out, it gets diffused a little bit between Seahawks and Kraken and Sounders and
Mariners for
Mariners.
the playoffs.
Yeah, so pretty good representation and of UW fans given all that, but Eugene is like its own little world, as is State College. So
Yeah.
that probably contributes to the intensity of the game day experience.
It's all they got.
Right. Yeah.
Although at least Oregon does have the Blazers, I suppose. But generally, they're more pro teams. If you are a Washington Huskies fan and you lose on Saturday, man, you get the Seahawks on Sunday.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Versus an Ohio State fan that has the Browns and Bengals. Wah, 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 I mean, and we've said on this podcast before, one of the things why Ohio State has been so good and so popular among being really, quote, the only university in Ohio, which of course that bristles other alumni of other schools. But the Browns and for the longest time the Bengals were terrible. So if you wanted to follow a winner, you followed the Buckeyes. And that's just what you did. And it's been that way for a long, long time. So um, even though there are pro teams, again, Cincinnati and Cleveland, Columbus, I mean, the Buckeyes are the pro team. Sorry, Jackets and crew, because they're pro teams also. But I mean, there's no question where the interest lies. Anyhow, Minnesota, which is another urban school.
Right.
Um, there
Minneapolis.
aren't, yeah, there aren't a lot. In fact, I think that would be well, other than UCLA, USC, before they joined the Big Ten, like I think Minnesota was in the largest population,
Uh,
actually right in the city.
are we discounting Chicago's Big Ten?
Oh God. Well, that's Evanston, but yes, that's fair. Yeah, Chicago.
You can
That's
discount
right. That's right. Chicago's Big Ten team.
Evanston's a suburb, so you can.
You're right. That's fair. That's fair. Chicago. Yeah,
So
I
it
kind
depends
of
how
did.
much
I
state.
did overlook the Wildcats. Anyhow, on to Minnesota. What do you know about the Golden Gophers other than their coaches uh, would be a pretty good one of these guys that does electronics commercials.
Yeah, let's paddle upstream here to the Gophers.
Yeah. He's he's something else. What do you know about the Gophers?
Well, they're an unusual Minnesota team in that they are not as run heavy as a lot of PJ Flex teams have been in the past. Normally, this is a matchup. You come into it and you think they're going to just run the ball all over you, and they've been much better passing the ball. They're 45th nationally in pass offense with a pretty good quarterback in Drake Lindsay. So different sort of profile than you normally expect from the Gophers.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that'll work up in an open air stadium in Minnesota in November. But even October up there. But we'll see. Um, Sometimes it can be a little tough to play up there. I mean, it's especially coming off a I don't know. Well, wait a minute. Game's here.
A rare,
Never mind.
rare.
I'm thinking so much about cold and what it's like, to throw the football up in Minnesota, and they're going to be here, so that's to their advantage.
A rare night game for Ohio State fans. 7:30 p.m. kickoff. Not a writer's preferred kickoff time, but for the Ohio State fans who are sick of noon games or early afternoon games, you get I think a night game, which in October is pretty nice. And this will probably be the last night game of the year because it's Penn State November 1st, and that's likely to be a noon game. And then you don't have other home games until the middle of November against Rutgers and UCLA, and those are probably not going to be a night considering they're being played in mid to late November. So if you
Is this a Big Ten? Is this a Big Ten network or Peacock? What is this?
NBC
Oh, it's NBC.
prime time, prime time national television game, network television,
Wow. Okay. Well, there you go. Means longer. Does that mean longer commercials?
probably three and one Gophers against the
Yeah.
Buckeyes.
Uh, don't
Second,
see a problem. Don't
second,
see a problem. Don't see a problem for Ohio State here, but
I think it'll be sort of a fun matchup in the sense that we've seen Ohio State play really high level competition in Texas, top 10 team, and then you go on the road for the first time where there's some new variables, and then you've played some really overmatched opponents. And Minnesota, I think, will be fun to sort of assess Ohio State and see how they do things from the standpoint. This is more of your middle of the pack Big Ten team, and that probably gives them some reason maybe to open things up a little more and try to put more on Sayan's plate, and we'll see if how he handles that against a, a team like Minnesota because he passed the test I think against Ohio and Grambling State, and they didn't have him do too much in the Texas Washington games. Do they give him a little more in this one?
I think so. In thinking about Washington just for a second and saying it did seem like he had to scramble a bit. He just couldn't sit back in the pocket. I don't know if the pressures are on there, but I don't think he got sacked.
No, and it felt like in a lot of those situations, it's because the coverage was strong enough where he wasn't getting the look. It didn't feel like he was immediately flush from the pocket. He was hanging in there and then taking off when stuff
Yeah,
was
and
going.
I guess my point is that's a good sign because we know if you give him time, he will find guys, usually the right guys. He doesn't always see if there's one little soft underbelly of saying it may be field vision is not in the CJ Stroud category, which, CJ Stroud's the best I've seen as an Ohio State quarterback of seeing the field and just knowing where to go with the ball. Saying's pretty good at it. He's not quite as good, but that's one thing maybe he could work on. And if you give him time, he'll be able to work on it. If you flush him out of the pocket or he has to scramble, it's a little tough to read the field. Then you're just kind of in desperate mode and you're throwing guys open or something like that. But I'm with you. I think this is a good test. We'll see what they have. We'll see if the defense can be just as tough as it has been. I would assume that would be the case.
Yeah, and to me, I think what I'm watching as well is how does Ohio State continue to move the ball from a pace of play standpoint. Ryan Day talked about last season when they were managing a longer season due to the college football playoff that they were going to not really push the tempo as much to try to conserve the number of plays over a long season. And they have borrowed from that same playbook again this year. They're averaging just 61 plays a game, and they're at the bottom of the FBS in terms of most tempo statistics. They are playing slow again. And you look at last season early on, they had two of the first four games. They went over 70 plays. They haven't gone over 70 plays in a game this season. The most was 66 against Grambling, 62 against Washington, 63 against Ohio, and then 54 against Texas. So they are playing slower, and I wonder if that changes at all. Do they push the
I don't know. I
tempo?
think that's intentional, right? I mean, you don't just kind of, those numbers aren't just kind of flukish. I think they learned something, and Ryan Day has spoken to that. It's like, okay, we're trying to save bodies here. We anticipate 16 game season, and we need to save these guys a little bit, which again is why they're rotating tailbacks. And keep an eye on that. Peoples probably will get more carries now that I think about it because of that. But to your point, they're not rushing things, they're taking their time. And again, that feeds into the defense. Like you don't need to have 70 plus plays, 80 plays a game or whatever, and put up 50 points and just try to pour it on. The eyeball test, maybe just for a second, the eyeball test is not as important as it used to be because of the expanded playoff. You used to have to put up 70 on a team and move up in the polls. And
Mm,
now
yeah,
who cares about the AP poll in a sense? Who cares about the polls? It's just win the game. That's all you have to do, just win the game.
get through the regular season with as few losses as possible and keep your roster as healthy as possible. I mean, that's
That's
really
it.
the. Although you do want to establish a rhythm for guys as well, and there probably is a balance to it because you want to limit the number of plays to preserve your health. But if you have new pieces as part of your offense, you want to probably give them some snaps as well to get comfortable and build chemistry and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd agree with that. Did Keenholz didn't get in the game, did he? Late.
We did not see the Lincoln Keenholz pass.
Which I guess that 24-6, but it was kind of out of hand late, and Sand was still in there. Again, that seems to be a
And
standard, at least for Ryan Day.
I think the thing to be on alert with Keenholz is, do they use him in the red zone? Do they use him on fourth and short? They had that 4th and 1 on their opening drive. Do you put Lincoln Keenholz in there and give them the option of does the defense chase Keenholz? Do they think he might keep it, or do they go with the running back who gets the handoff on the option?
I'm seeing maybe, but they didn't do it this time, and uh, it's becoming apparent that Lincoln Keenholz is an insurance policy at this point, I think.
But
Which you have to have one. So there you go.
maybe we will see him against Minnesota. We will.
Yeah, maybe.
Thanks for thanks everyone for joining us on the Buckeye Extra Football Podcast. As always, that was Rob Oller. I'm Joey Kaufman. Stay tuned for more coverage ahead of Ohio State, Minnesota at dispatch.com. And thank you for subscribing and joining us on this latest podcast.